Hello YouTube, I'm back with the next My Little Pony Tales episode review, and today I'm reviewing An Apple for Starlight, which is episode 16. And this is an episode where Miss Hackney ends up teaching, but then gets sick and leaves Starlight in charge, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it's how Starlight actually implements being a teacher. Because I would have thought that Miss Hackney would have wanted them to stay in the classroom instead of going on some dangerous adventure, even if it was meant to go along with the lesson. And what's interesting is the fact that there seem to be regular occurrences that happen in the classroom because Miss Hackney's tape indicates that, almost on cue, that Melody's listening to her music and tells her to stop. And of course, that must happen a lot. Bon Bon not knowing the answer either. So, which is, it almost makes you wonder, how did she plan that accordingly? It must be happening so regularly that she has to make a cassette tape of all this happening. The only problem is the fact that Starlight has never been a teacher before, although, and granted, yes, it's her future passionate of a job, she's not going to be very good at it, especially since it was on spur of the moment, like almost, she was handed that literally within minutes after getting it. And she ends up putting her home class basically in danger, more or less. I mean, granted, yeah, she gets them out, but of course, like any substitute teacher, most of them don't know what the subject is that the class was originally teaching before they came in, and students, even as shown here, don't really care. So they're basically not even bothered. So if the substitute teacher is even conscious enough to ask, "What were you guys teaching yesterday?" most of the students aren't going to care because, let's face it, they don't value their education very much. And this is shown a little bit in Tales, but not greatly. And Starlight just ends up, even Starlight realizes she's kind of in over her head doing this. I mean, granted, yes. After getting them stuck, she ends up using what Miss Hackney had taught them. Though if they had stayed in the classroom in the first place, this wouldn't have happened. This entire episode actually wouldn't have happened. So, truth be told, she's not really that great of a teacher, but at the same time, you can't fault her entirely because it was just thrown at her kind of last minute. Miss Hackney does get better at the end, learns things that went over well. She was kind of lucky to get them out. I mean, if they either didn't have that lesson on pulleys, or they didn't have the materials to put it together, they would not have gotten out of there, and Miss Hackney probably would have been worried sick. Which is ironic, in fact, she was actually sick earlier in the episode. But it's a kind of a textbook example of what happens usually when you get a substitute teacher. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they have enough to actually acknowledge they have been told what you've learned and will continue where they left off as best they can, but most of them don't. Usually they're just spur of the moment. Oh, by the way, come substitute for me because I'm sick. And students usually don't care. They're usually happy to have a substitute teacher because usually the teacher they have is boring and or doesn't know what they're talking about. I know I've had substitute teachers. I've had at least one my English teacher actually, literally, I'm not kidding, actually was out much of the school year, at least once. And the teacher we got didn't even bother to explain what was going on. So we those that actually remotely did the assignment, which may not have been good to begin with, because of course, obviously, as I said, they didn't even bother to tell us what it was or how to do it. Even the assignment itself didn't say 5-paragraph essay. So I wrote like a paragraph or two and got kind of scolded for it, even though I'm one of the few that actually remotely did the assignment. So it just goes to show you that substitute teachers are generally not adequate at teaching. You might as well almost have the day off, or at least have that class period off. I mean, what's the point? You're not getting your learning out of it anyway. At least most likely, but yeah, it's only like remotely partially on topic here. So it's just kind of a nice example. It actually follows a lot to how schools typically do it these days. So, and this was back in the early 90s, this show. It's not a bad episode. At least they actually get, it's not like they end up just goofing off the entire time. Starlight does use the tape to at least help out. So she must have these planned just on the off chance she's sick. That's probably actually not a bad idea, because then that means you can still get the lesson, still do the assignments as taught, even though you won't be able to answer, take any questions on it. But that's probably something that's not a bad idea to actually have in case the teacher's sick. That probably should be done, because then that would replace substitute teachers. You wouldn't even need them. You just get out, play the tape, and go on with the assignment as best you can. Although, obviously, it may not help all that much, considering that, again, most kids are not even going to care. They're going to drown it out in the background with whatever music they're playing, or, whatever's on their iPhone, because I'm sure. But they wouldn't even think. It would have to be, it would have to probably have, a message, take out the recording, or whatever device they used, and play it. So it'd have to be, well thought out. It'd have to be rather large, so that people pick up on it right away when they get in there. So oh, okay, so no teacher. Of course, at the same time, if you didn't have a teacher, you end up risking, kind of breaking the rules, doing, because you never know with students these days. They can end up being, granted, once you get to college, it usually gets a little bit better, but, the tape thing isn't a bad idea, because then it means it means that students can actually listen to the tape, follow along what it says to do, and then be done with it and pass it on to another student so that they can listen to the tape. The problem is, if it's outdated like a cassette tape, you risk it, falling apart, and then you don't have a recording to deal with, so you should probably have more than one. But this is, classrooms don't usually, this is kind of more typical of how classrooms typically are, these days. Teddy was throwing a paper airplane in the classroom, which is typical. I think a lot of cartoons have that going on, but it's not a bad episode. Starlight did her best her could, so you can't really fault her entirely for what happened. So, yeah, that's my review on this episode. Thanks.